All right, we are live. Hello and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. My name is Harold Thornborough. I'm joined as usual by my co-host Rachel Jameson, and we got a new person on the podcast. Well, he's been on before, but
Yes.
he's not normally on with us. Jonah Curtis, and we appreciate you joining us today, Jonah. And but we thought you'd be a great guest for today's topic. We're going to talk about kind of preparing and cooking wild game, and you're a pretty avid hunter and preparer of wild game. So we thought you'd be a great guest for today's show. So welcome to the podcast.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here. Happy to join you, and definitely love talking about hunting, fishing, and cooking.
Those are great topics. Yes.
Yeah. You've been on before. I don't remember what episode it was. I should have looked that up. But yeah, you were on. Rachel interviewed you. I don't know. Probably could have been close to a year ago, hadn't it? I don't know. It's been a while.
It's probably
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah, and then you just talked about what you were doing on your homestead, which is a lot. You're doing a lot on your homestead. Do you want to give everybody just kind of a mile high view of your some of the things you got going on, like property?
Sure.
And real quick.
Yep. So we're here in Southern Michigan. My wife and children and I, and then my mother and father-in-law live next door. And so we have just a little 8-acre homestead where we raise turkeys, pigs, rabbits, and chickens for meat. We have laying hens. We have a couple big gardens. We do permaculture, fruit trees, pretty much everything, mushrooms. We have a couple ponds on here, so we have some fish. And then, pretty much all the stuff. And then hunting and fishing, lots of canning, food preservation, freeze drying. Yeah, I can't think of anything that I don't at least give a shot to.
Couple things. You're doing a couple things on your homestead.
Just a few.
Yeah, anybody that's in our Homestead Front Porch Facebook group, I think is always kind of amazed. You post a lot of stuff in there, what you're doing and what's going on all the time, and the foraging that you do with mushrooms, especially, and just growing stuff and hunting. And you've got a lot going on, but and you're just a family guy. You know, I love how you always got your little kids out there with you doing this stuff. I'm even hunting with you, and they're little.
Oh yeah,
your kids are like under 5.
My son. Oh yeah, my son just turned 4. My daughter's 2.5.
Yeah, and I see you'll have her on your back going hunting.
Yeah, we got a doe last week in a snowstorm. It wasn't a snowstorm when we started, but by the time we were done, it was. And so she had to have a sled ride out on a dead doe, and she kept telling me it was pretty cold. I mean, I had her bundled up, and I had her actually in a all-weather sleeping bag, but she kept telling me, "Daddy, I'm tough." I'd ask her how she's doing. "Daddy, I'm tough." I'm like, "Okay, honey, you're doing great."
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I just love how you're getting them involved and really have them out there learning this stuff and just enjoying it too. You know, it's not just about learning; it's about enjoying it. And they look like they're always having a great time.
That's what I figure. And we're big into the family aspect of it. I don't want to just do this stuff on my own. Means more when we all do it together. And ideally, I know they're learning a lot, even at their age. Like my son. Well, both of them will go on walks with their grandparents and their grandparents' friends, and my children will point out animal tracks, edible mushrooms, non-edible mushrooms, and all these things. And the adults are like, "What is going on with these kids?" I'm like, "Hey, no TV. This is what's going on with these kids. They're outside a lot."
That's great.
They're learning by osmosis.
Mm-hmm.
Just soaking it in, aren't they? Yeah,
that's
great, man. You're doing a lot of things right there, man. I think it's great what you're doing.
I appreciate it.
Super inspiring. Super inspiring.
Well, thank you.
Well, Rachel, any updates on the new homestead? Did you get electricity yet?
We finally got electricity.
Oh, well,
all right.
There, I've been waiting for this. I'm so glad you got your electricity now.
I feel like we've been in waiting mode forever, and there's a possibility we'll get our occupancy tomorrow.
Wow!
All right.
Yeah. We'll see though. We'll see.
Huh?
So we might be moving over Christmas.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
that's exciting. Yeah,
it is. I'm trying not to think about it because I'm so busy with work that I really can't. One day at a time.
Yeah, my major activity, homesteading activity now is just the countdown until spring, 90 days. I keep thinking about 90 days. We're having springtime.
Yeah, those seed catalogs keep coming in the mail. And my husband looked at me and he goes, you can't buy anymore. Not right now.
I've been doing a lot of, I'm trying to just kind of get my homestead shop kind of organized, and kind of, this is the time of the year you're using that more. It seems like you're indoors doing that kind of stuff for me anyway. And so I've been kind of organizing that, and just, I'm doing a lot more work in there right now. I think I need to do an episode on that and just talk about, like, kind of separating and dividing up my shop and the different things we're doing there. So I might have to do that, a future episode on that, because it's kind of nice having like a fabrication section, a mechanic section, woodworking section, just kind of dividing up the shop a little bit. And it's kind of a major part of my homestead, actually.
Well, and that's one of the hardest things, I think, as a homesteader, is often we're busy year round. So getting things organized and squared away is so challenging, because you're before you're really done with the last one, you're transitioning into the next one. So getting stuff put away is pretty tricky. And my shop, everything feels like it's a perpetual mess of whatever the last thing I was doing. I got the thing put away from 2 times ago, but the thing I was doing last is not quite put away yet.
I'll get the bench nice and cleaned off in one project, and it looks like I never touched it. Everything's all over it.
So we're turning a 3rd bedroom into a pantry room, because the house isn't really big. And one of the things I might do is podcast from there. And the reason is because I figure if I do the podcast from there, I'll make myself clean up after myself.
I don't know. This room's pretty messy. I'm podcasting in right now.
It doesn't look like it from
All
here.
you got to do is have this part clean, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I'm like. I'm already thinking, what am I going to have back there instead of this white wall?
Yeah, right.
It'll be way more exciting to look at.
Well, we're gonna jump into our topic here, and I think it's a great topic. I think hunting and just providing game meat, wild game meat for a homestead can be a really important and major part of a homestead. So much opportunity there to fill your freezers and put food on your table by hunting. And especially when you're in a situation like, say, you have a small homestead where you can't, say, raise cattle or hogs or something like that. It even becomes more important, because it really becomes a major way to get large amounts of meat in your freezer that's good, nutritious meat. And so there's a really strong connection in just, wild game meat and homesteading, or there can be. I love that it's, it can be, if it's done properly, it can be ethical and sustainable. It's, a source of meat, and the nutritional benefits are just off the charts. Generally, wild game meat has higher protein, higher iron, essential B vitamins, things like that. So, I mean, there's just a lot of benefits to it, but there's kind of a trick to it. Cooking it, preparing it, getting it right. Because if it's not done right, maybe the food that we're used to eating, it kind of throws us off a bit, because it's not like that.
Right.
I mean, is that your all's experience when you're dealing with wild game meat?
I know when I first got married, my dad did not hunt or anything. So it was a pretty big difference for me. The way that it tasted. I'm sorry, you can probably hear my dogs barking.
No, it's all good.
Yeah, the way it all tasted, it was just totally different. It was that wild game taste. Now it's been so long that I've just kind of gotten used to it. So I'm pretty sure that we don't ever get the gamey taste out of it, but it's an acquired taste. And so now, now we just eat it.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think that there's something to some of the gaminess. I think, or what is described as, quote unquote gaminess. Some of that is just the way that meat tastes compared to domestic meat. Far less fat, far less intramuscular fat, and some of the fat is less palatable. Like with deer, it's a tallow, not really like a fat like in a pork. But also, I think that the preparation from the minute that game is down makes a huge difference in the flavor. And I have found with a lot of people, when I ask follow-up questions, when they say, well, I don't like wild game, I will ask, well, after you shot it, then what was next? And some of the mistakes that are made are waiting too long to field dress and cool it down. And particularly if you have a shot that was less than ideal and went through the abdominal cavity. And then you want to keep, like, one of the deer I got this year was a buck that was in rut. And the outside of a rutting buck, I could smell from 200 yards downwind. And they have oils on their fur. And so the idea is when you skin that animal, you want to keep those things on the outside. And so I think proper preparation like that, getting it skinned out, getting it cooled down rapidly, and getting everything cleaned off quickly make an enormous difference. And then in the processing, I don't really trust anyone to do any job that I can do most of the time, but in particular, like sending a game animal to a processor, I don't think is a wise choice unless it's someone you really trust or you really have had good experience or know someone. There are glands and issues with big game that if you're in a hurry, there are glands near the abdominal cavity. There are some in the thigh on deer and on the shoulders, and those can be a real problem if those just go into your grind, or even if you run a knife through those scent glands and then continue cutting your meat, that will spread it throughout. I think a lot of the gaminess are those, factors of just those early steps, getting things prepared and done right.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I know even if I'm, butchering something as small as a rabbit or anything, I mean, you just gotta be super careful about not puncturing the bladder. And if you do make a mistake, you got to wash things off really fast. Like you said, get it cooled down quick. And of course some animals I can smell, honestly, anytime I'm up in a tree stand, I can generally smell a deer coming before I can see a deer coming. It happens all the time. I've actually, I smell one. You can actually smell them a lot of times. It depends on the weather.
For sure.
But I have before, many times. So yeah, you're right. I mean, and you just have to pay attention to those things. Be careful with the feces, the hair, any bloodshot areas. Those things you want to get rid of and get them out of there because they can definitely have an effect for sure. What about aging? How do you age all meat that you shoot, or any of it, or how do you handle that?
I age whitetails. I age deer if I have the opportunity. There was a chef at a restaurant, an old German chef at a restaurant where I used to work, and he would try to age things very, very long. Like, I can't remember what he wanted to do, like 30 plus days.
Wow.
And I thought that was pushing it, but I do try to. So we have an underground, like next to our root cellar, there's an in-ground building. So if the conditions are right, I do prefer to age, but I don't think it's the end all be all. I think it does make a difference. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. But if you gave me, like most of mine, I try and age for at least 14 days, 2 weeks, if conditions are right. And if I took a cut that was aged 2 or 3 weeks and a cut that wasn't aged at all and cooked them, I could probably tell the difference. But I don't think it's a huge, huge thing. But I do think it's worth doing if you have the time and opportunity.
Yeah, I don't, if you don't have a cooler to hang that thing in, and you're saying early deer season, I mean, here in Indiana, I mean, I've been out there hunting in 75-degree weather.
Yeah.
Easily.
You're not going to age that in your garage.
No.
Now you're talking deer, not birds, right? For aging.
Yeah.
No, I know there are old world ways of aging birds, and I have not been brave enough to try them because honestly, I'm pretty well trained in food safety, and they sound pushing it to me. People age waterfowl, people age grouse, and I'm not for me. I basically get them cooled, and then I'll let them, be in the refrigerator or cooler for a couple of days before I process them. But no, I don't age birds, and I don't age small game. I mean, I kill probably 100 to 150 squirrels a year, and I don't age those. They go from the field to the refrigerator within an hour or two generally.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify for people, because I mean, I've heard of people aging poultry, but we've never done it either. But we do try to age our deer.
Yeah. If the weather's right. Yeah, like I said, sometimes it's just impossible. I mean, if you don't have a cooler or anything.
Yeah, especially bow season. It's usually pretty warm.
Yeah.
Right.
Generally when I'm out there, if I'm out there doing it, it's like early. You're always excited, and then you get that, archery season's up. It's like, okay, let's get after this. And then it's like I said, 75 degrees, and the mosquitoes are swarming your head right here in the deer stand.
Oh yeah. Sweating your tail off on the way in and out. Yeah.
And you're almost hoping you don't get one because it's gonna be really high dragging that thing out, and as hot as it is.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we love bow season because it's warm and there's less people in the woods. But when it comes to aging the deer, we definitely like the later rifle season because usually up here it's cold.
Now I have done, I did this a couple years ago, a couple of times, where I've taken an air conditioner and not like a cool bot, just a straight up air conditioner, plugged it in and had like a tarped off setup in my barn just to get them cooled down. But it wasn't really like an aging. I didn't keep it up there for 2 weeks. It was mostly when it was hotter than heck to get them cooled down a little bit. And it was nights where it was going to be cool anyway. Like if it's going to be 75 at night in October when you've got this deer, I would quarter it up and get it in a cooler as quickly as I can. But I've had times where I've used like an air conditioner or something like that to help it. And I've even put bags of ice in the chest cavity. What you don't want to do is have your meat, you don't want to put it in a cooler with bare ice and have it get washed out. You know, that's a big mistake.
Because a lot of people do that and then the meat gets all watery and washed out.
Yeah, it's almost worthless at that point. Like I have a couple of bigger coolers, like salmon type coolers, or I have a big Yeti, and I put wire racks in the bottom, put ice in the bottom, and then have the meat on top. So it's not touching it. Yeah, it's not touching the ice at all. The only time I will have ice directly touching meat is I'll actually, just to cool it down in the initial night, I will put a bag of ice like in the chest cavity when I have the deer hanging like on a gambrel hook. And that helps, but it doesn't really wash anything out because it's not immersed in the icy water. That's where you get into trouble. And I don't know if you've ever seen someone who's done that or made the mistake yourself, but it'll turn what should be nice, dark purple venison into something that looks like the cheapest cut of pork, like white almost, no color to it.
Right. And again, you mentioned this earlier, but this is why I'm really fond of doing all this myself too, because you lose all this control when you send it to the processing plant. I mean, if you're sending it to a slaughterhouse, and a lot of them say they don't do it, but you just can't help but think a lot of that gets mixed up too. And how the other guy prepare, and take care of his animal once he shot it, or whichever, and they take it to the slaughterhouse, and some of that meat probably gets, mixed up. And you don't know if they cared for it or not. And again, you don't get to take all this care if you're not doing it yourself. So all this gets left out.
Well, there's no one who cares about what I feed my family as much as I do, is what I figure. So, and the other part is, I'm very against waste. It really bothers me. Like I've had talks with hunters before when I've found deer carcasses where they didn't even take all the meat off. Like I found where they've disposed of carcasses, and it just, I find it terribly frustrating. And I know that when I bone out my deer, I get pretty much everything that is salvageable off from there. And then actually, this was on the Homestead front porch today. We were talking about it on the Facebook thing, but talking about making either stock or bone broth. And I do that all the time. I mean, I do it with almost every animal, domestic or wild, that I kill. I make stock. My pantry has some weird stock in it. But I'll get as much meat as I can with my boning knife, but then I'll roast the bones, simmer the stock for, usually I'll do about 12 hours is what I try and do. And then I strain it, but then I'll go through my strainer and get as much of the meat as I can. And I'll save that and use that for like a soup starter next time. I mean, it still has flavor even after all that. It still tastes pretty good. And the stock is this beautiful, rich, dark. It actually looks about the color of this wall behind me with my venison stock. But yeah, then you're not really losing anything. Like basically by the time I'm done, there are bare cooked bones that are going in my compost or to my chicken coop, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes a full circle because you're composting those bones, and you can take whatever offal you want, or offal, whatever everybody calls it. A lot of times butchers can't give you back specific things. You don't usually get your bones back.
Right.
And if you don't want to boil the bones, you can put that out in your chicken coop, and the chickens will love that.
They sure will. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why we always do our own, because like you get so much more out of it.
We have a question that came in on YouTube here. It says, how much of a difference does it make to roast the bones or not?
Big difference. Yeah, I think so you get some, basically like a caramelization when you roast those bones, because it cooks the meat on there. I think it's quite a difference. And I think if you did it the two side by side, I think unroasted would still be fine. It'd probably still be palatable, but I think it tastes much better once they're roasted, and I think it's a better looking product too. I think it's a little darker, prettier product too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely has a flavor that's better for sure.
Yeah. Like I always roast them. And usually what I'll do is it depends on how much time I have. Sometimes I just roast the bones, do the stock with those, and that's it. Often though, if I have time, like I'll simmer those overnight. Then in the morning, I'll roast some either garlic, carrots, celery. Sometimes I do onions. I didn't used to do onions because when we had dogs, I would sometimes give the stock to my dogs, and onion is particularly bad for dogs, so I switched to garlic. But I would roast those and then throw that in the mix and simmer that for another hour or two just to last a little bit with those carrots and roasted veggies in there. But sometimes if I don't have time, I just do the meat.
Yep.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you do anything with your hide?
Not anymore. I mean, how many animal hides do you really need? It's, I compost them. Generally like in our compost right now, there are a few deer hides, there are a couple of pig hides. And so those take a while to break down, and they are tricky in the compost because you're going to have possums trying to get in there. You're going to have raccoons. But yeah, I have before. I mean, my grandpa taught me how to tan or flesh and tan hides. I can do it. I'll still do it with rabbits sometimes, but yeah, how many deer hides do you really need? And honestly, we don't have any in the house right now because they get worn out too. The hair does pull if you use them, but it's a valid thing to do. It is a ton of work, especially like tanning them is not that hard. Fleshing is kind of hard. Tanning them, the process is not that challenging, but softening one is a chore. You're spending some time getting that stiff deer hide into something usable and soft.
What I do rather to break them down instead of throwing them in the compost, because like you said, they don't break down very fast in the compost. I'll dig a hole in a garden bed and just bury them about 2 foot deep in a garden bed, and then let the worms just kind of tear them up underneath the garden bed. And it's a good way to break them down, and it doesn't get in your way. It doesn't type your compost.
And I wouldn't have to fight as many possums. I might have to try that.
Yep, that's what I do. Anything like that I just know is going to take a while to break down. I don't want to have to mess with it in the compost. I will just find one of my garden beds that's kind of done for the season or whatever, and I'll just dig a hole a couple feet, shove it down in there, and let the worms take care of it.
I might do that. That's a good idea.
Whole new meaning to lasagna gardening.
Yeah.
Years ago on the podcast, I had a guest on. You've heard of David the Good?
Yeah.
And he talked about that. We were talking about composting, and he called that. He just said, I'll throw some beef stew in a hole in a garden bed and let it break down rather than just throwing it in a compost pile and letting the animals, tear into it. And, it just works for a lot of things. If you just want to break something down, but you don't really want it in the compost, just bury it in the garden and it works really good.
That's a good idea.
So that's good. That's good stuff on the bones. Making use of them. You're right. I mean, we want to make use of everything we can. I mean, if you can use the hides, if you're going to do something with the hides, it's great. But for eating, I mean, there's just no sense throwing away any of this stuff. I'm careful to get out a lot of the silver skin and stuff like that, and get that out of my meat because that's all gristle and things like that. I mean, I try to remove all that stuff, cut that stuff away, but you can still put that in like a stock and cook it down and strain it out. But yeah, I mean, try to make as much use of as you can out of everything. And that's my go-to thing anyway. When you're you've basically processed your entire animal. Do you find how you preserve it to really affect the taste?
Yeah, I suppose so. So, and my technique for breaking it down has changed over the years. It actually really warmed my, again, talking about my kids, one of my favorite things was going from packaging venison for a family of 2 to then a family of 3 and then a family of 4. Like that has really made me pretty pleased. But and I vacuum seal most of mine. I will butcher paper some of it, but I really like vacuum sealing. And I find that freezer burn is not as big of a concern as most people would have you believe. I have pulled out meat that looks mighty freezer burned, and you trim a 1/16 of an inch off the outside, and everything under that looks completely fine. And I do freeze mine with the silver skin on. I do my trimming when it's time to cook. And this could be, I haven't done I have no science to back up the statement I'm about to make, but I believe that the silver skin, when I leave it on, is just one more layer of protection from like freezer burn or anything like that. Like if anything's going to get freezer burn, it would be the silver skin. And then when I, like on a piece of backstrap, I will trim that off. But for my preservation, I usually do vacuum sealing and freezing. I do some canned meat. Yeah. And then that's really about it. I don't do a ton of jerky or anything like that, dried stuff. I freeze dry some. I freeze dry some meat too.
When I'm doing, I love vacuum sealing as well. That's what I do most of mine. But I find with like small game animals, like squirrel and rabbit stuff, you got to be really careful because them little bones and the legs and stuff will poke right through that stuff so easy. You have to be really kind of careful how you tuck that in there and wrap it up.
Yeah, usually I'll do 2 or 3 squirrels to a package, and it looks like they're just giving each other hugs. Like it's like big spoon, little spoon, like they're curled in there. Yep.
Yeah, you got to pay attention to where them bones are sticking out because it will. It will poke through it for sure.
We sometimes will use freezer paper and wrap it around the bone, and then vacuum seal it. Yeah,
that's a good idea. That's a really good idea because it doesn't sound like these are the little things you learn when you do a lot of this. You're like, oh yeah, ruined that because it's set in there, with exposed for a long time. Now I know, like Rachel, you've canned a whole deer before. I've seen you do it on you. I've seen you pictures of you guys just canning a whole thing because you run out of freezer space, right?
Yes.
Yep.
So it can be done. There's other things. I mean, you can.
I wouldn't say it's the most flavorful way to process a deer, but when you run out of freezer space, you do what you got to do.
Right. You can make certain things. You can hang. I mean, anybody ever cured things like with salt or like biltong or anything like that with the deer meat? Can you do that?
We do. We've done a lot of jerky. I have not done venison biltong.
Yeah, I wonder how that. I don't know if that.
I don't know.
Good. But I don't know. We love to make venison jerky. That's actually, my husband does not spend very much time in the kitchen, but that is the one thing that he spends time in the kitchen doing is his jerky. And the other thing that we have done is made venison, like corned beef, but corned venison. Yeah, and that's just like a curing process where you use, a bunch of different spices and then it cures in the refrigerator for a few days. Yep. It's pretty yummy.
Yeah, we like corned venison too. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it's great. And then especially if you made some homemade sauerkraut from your cabbage. Yeah, and then I can't have rye bread, but my husband loves, of course, having a Reuben.
I bet he does. Yep.
I don't want to just only focus on deer. I mean, that's where we live. It's our largest wild game that we can get. But I also do want to talk about, like wild turkey and rabbit and squirrel and other waterfowl and things like that. Would you guys do anything different with wild game in those areas than you would for domestic, like turkey or rabbit?
Oh yeah.
Especially.
I've never had wild turkey, so I don't know.
So I raise turkeys for meat here, but most of the ones that when I raise them and I butcher them, they're 4 or 5 months old, 6 months old tops, And so, and when I hunt a wild, in Michigan, we can only kill toms in the spring, and in the fall, you can hunt a hen also. Although I've never gotten a hen, but so this spring I got a tom, and then this fall I got another tom with my bow, and both of those were 3.5-year-old probably bird, or 3 or 3.5-year-old birds. They were mature, basically as big as a tom gets. Beard on the ground, long spurs, like a mature tom. And the meat is not going to be as tender as a 6-month-old little delicious baby. So there's just a different game. And so I have plucked them before and roasted them, but it's a lot of work making that to be as good. And it's just not, when you expect a Thanksgiving turkey and then you cook a wild 3.5-year-old bird, it's just not going to be what you're expecting. So that's not the best way to use it, in my opinion. So I generally will dress them out. I'll take the legs and I'll use them for, I'll braise them and then pull the meat and make fajitas or make carnitas or something like that. Or, and then the neck, I'll usually do like soup, use that for a soup starter. the breast, I'll cut out each lobe and do it separately. And then I'll do like basically like a schnitzel or something like that with it. The wings, I'll roast those and do either, I don't know. We've done a number of things. I've tried just like roasted turkey wings, and they're pretty good, but it's a lot of meat. And then I'll take the carcass, of course, and I'll roast that and make wild turkey stock with it too. So I feel like the best way with like a turkey, a wild turkey, is to use each part as what it is best suited to, as opposed to a domestic turkey, which, I mean, you can do that way also, or you can, but it's so good to just roast, a 25-pound bird as well, or an 18-pound bird, but we get hungry. So like 22, 25-pound bird, roast the whole thing. But a wild one, yeah, I definitely treat it differently.
Yeah.
Same thing with wild rabbit. There are plenty, first year rabbits, and I treat those more or less the same. Although, my mother will not eat, the domestic rabbits we raise. So but I raise, we get 100 a year probably. I don't even know how many rabbits we raise a year. Quite a lot. And people think it's funny that I still hunt rabbits, but I barely ever eat any of the rabbits I hunt. I freeze all those and give them to my mother because she loves wild rabbit, but she will not eat a domestic rabbit. Just like they're just too cute for her. But you can treat those more about the same, as a domestic. They're not as fatty. Is the only difference. But if you cook them slow,
tougher. I find them a little tougher. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. They're the same thing. They're usually probably going to be a year or two old, where a domestic rabbit at the most is probably going to be 4 months old, 5 months old when you butcher it,
Fun fact, I have a herd of wild domestic rabbits in my yard now. Is that what
on purpose?
Probably not a herd.
A colony? I don't know. Are they on purpose?
We're going to call them a colony. Yes, that's what they are. Well, I had one get out a few months ago, and it met up with a neighbor's pet rabbit that also got out. And
what's going on in that neighborhood?
And now there's some babies running around.
Sure.
So we got and they're all over my yard. I keep seeing all different colors and all kinds of fun stuff.
Oh, that is funny.
I got
you better get
a mess of them now.
You better get them in the freezer before gardening season starts.
Exactly.
Well, I tell you what I'm worried about. It's like not even the garden as much. I mean, if garden, I probably could keep them under control with that. I'm more worried about them girdling some of my trees.
Yeah,
that too.
Because if food gets scarce, they can
Big
start
time.
those, and I am worried about that. So I might have to, take care of that.
Yeah, I lost an apple tree to wild rabbits last year, and it kind of salted me.
Yeah, they're really bad about chewing on trees. We have lost several things in our yard here due to rabbits.
Yeah, I'm going to cover them all this year. I should have last year, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It looks like I've got me a nice Rex New Zealand wild breed running around here that looks tasty. I don't know.
Yeah.
The best part is you didn't have to feed it or take
I don't
care
have to
of
feed them or water them.
Free range.
They're free range. Yeah. So, anyway, I find with getting back on these tougher, like squirrel, for example, squirrel is just notoriously tough. You have to, low and slow is your friend. But even with like things like wild turkey or, wild birds, I find that, the crock pot's great for this. If you're going to make like a turkey and noodles or something like that, it's a great way to make the best use of that because it's going to be really soft and tender and you're going to, make good use of it. Squirrel, this crazy, man. I love fried squirrel. You'll eat it like that. But have you ever had barbecue? You ever like put one in a crock pot and just spawn off the bone, pull it apart, put some barbecue in there and have like barbecue. It's really good. I
don't think we've done barbecue. We do a lot. We'll put them in the crock pot, actually instant pot now, but before it was the crock pot. And I used to, when I could eat gluten, I would make homemade egg noodles and make gravy, and man, that is good stuff right there.
I think I said it and people made fun of me on a podcast one time when I was talking about squirrel hunting, but I said, oh, they ain't no gravy like squirrel gravy.
Oh yeah. I did. So for work, last year we have like potlucks at work, and I work in schools. So, and a lot of the people I work with are not real outdoorsy, at least not my type of outdoorsy. And so it was my turn to make breakfast. So I did a regular like egg bake, like a casserole egg thing. But I took I don't know, 5 or 6 fox squirrels. I boned out the meat, ground it, and made squirrel sausage gravy with homemade biscuits. And I brought it in. And I told everybody. Well, I got to tell you, I make a pretty strong gravy. All right. But it was, I was a little nervous, and I told everyone, I'm like, listen, this is squirrel gravy. And they were like, are you serious? I'm like, totally serious. Try it. See what you think. If you don't like it, there's a regular breakfast over there. And some of those very adventurous souls tried it and loved it. I mean, it honestly tastes like, it was ground squirrel, which squirrel isn't, it's lean, but it doesn't taste lean. It to me, it just still has like a kind of a fattiness to it. And it was ground. It was squirrel, and you could definitely tell it wasn't pork. Like you could, and for me, I could tell that it tasted like squirrel. But it was a hit. I gotta tell you, it was a hit at the party there at work. But yeah, I did a meatball contest, a charity meatball contest a couple years ago, where I did squirrel meatballs too. And I did like a Korean barbecue meatball with chopped chives on it. It was pretty fancy, and sesame seeds and stuff. It was good. It's a lot of work. I think I had 10 fox squirrels into it, which boning out squirrels is much more difficult than just cooking them with the bone in. So it took me a while to make. I probably made, I don't even know. They were small meatballs, and I probably made 30. Who knows? But it was fun. But yeah, I like experimenting with squirrel. We've done where I'll braise them and slow cook them so they're basically tender and done, and then I'll take them out and make some kind of sauce, toss them in it, and then just throw them on the grill just to crisp up the outside. We've done that a number of times too, and that works with domestic rabbit or wild rabbit too.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, definitely low and slow is your friend. Either brown it and braise it, and then sometimes I'll put a crisp on it after too. But it's just that's the ticket.
Yeah.
Do you ever smoke any of them?
I have. I went through a while there where I feel like I ate every meal out of my smoker, and then I kind of got a little burned out on it. And a lot of times it just, with meat like that, it's good, but it's so easy to dry out. You've got to be on the ball in the smoker all the time. And I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze. I think it's a fun thing to do every now and again, but as a staple, it wouldn't really be my thing.
I love, my favorite thing is to run in a smoker, or things like quail and dove and things like that. And but like it's real easy to overcook. And we can talk about that for a minute too. Really, all wild game, people have a tendency to overcook it because there's this, like, I don't know, some kind of a fear because it's a wild game that we need to cook it a little longer or something. I don't know. It's like, I think it's a brain game we play. But you have to be careful about that. I mean, I think we can ruin our meat, obviously, if we overcook it and just isn't.
Yeah, I think that was when we first got married. I didn't know how to cook very well, anyways. But then I did that with the venison, and my father-in-law was like, "Well, you don't like it because you're turning it into like a deck of cards. You're turning it into cardboard." Yeah. So he showed me how to cook a venison steak, and I liked it after that.
Yeah.
So,
My go-to venison backstrap is like, I'll take a section of backstrap. I'll do, make sure it's been sitting out for a while. You don't want a steam line on it. So it's been sitting out for like an hour or so. So it's basically near room temperature. I'll do a rub on the outside. Then I'll get a cast iron skillet with quite a lot of butter. And I'll do some fresh herbs or some dried herbs in the butter, just a little bit at a low temp. So the butter starts absorbing those herb flavors. Then I will sear the outside of the backstrap all around in that butter. And then, we cook with gas, but I'll have, on my cast iron skillet, I'll have one edge of it in the heat, and I'll hold the pan, and I'll have the meat off the heat, and I'll ladle hot butter over that until it's fully cooked. It's like an arrosé, like a French steak method. And it's absolutely fantastic. But when I slice into that venison backstrap, you would think a good veterinarian might have a chance to still save this deer. I mean, the inside of it is red. But the outside, I mean, it's fully cooked. It's safe. I mean, I've eaten raw deer while I'm butchering it many times. It's totally fine, as long as it's been like frosted or whatever. But yeah, it is fantastic. And, my family, that's if I'm cooking backstrap, that's the way they want it, for sure. It kind of comes out looking like prime rib.
Yeah, my daughter actually made a really good backstrap with she used garlic and balsamic vinegar, and the same thing she used. This is when your meat thermometer is your friend, so you don't overcook it. Yeah, and it was so good, so good.
My kids were kind of funny about eating wild game growing up. They just didn't. I don't know. They just had a mental thing about it. But so it's just like if I threw this stuff on the stove and just cooked it straight up, it wasn't that good. But if I was to marinate some, like slice up some backstrap, marinate it for a few hours, and then cook it up, yeah, they'd eat every bit of it. They loved it, and they didn't care that it was deer then or anything, as long as you had a good marinade on it. And
Right,
that's kind of a hint for people who. There are people who just, I mean, those of us who eat a lot of game, we don't the gamey thing. It's like some people say it's a myth, it's gamey. There's a different taste. I mean, it's just different.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah,
and if you're not used to that, marinade, I think, is your friend. Rubs, marinades, things like that, until you can your palate will adjust over time, and you'll find you're doing less of that. But early on, if you want to get used to it, you can start marinating things and change that ease up that flavor a little bit, and it will help you kind of adapt to that flavor profile.
Exactly. Like everybody loves, I think, start with things you're used to and then transition into something that features the meat itself more. I'm taking some venison into some coworkers tomorrow, and I bet every one of them is going to use that venison for venison chili. I'm taking some ground venison. Yeah. And everybody loves venison chili, and they don't think it's gamey. But yeah, if they made a venison burger, they might, and it's just the flavor of the meat. So I think you slowly, if you're interested in really pursuing wild game as a staple of your diet, if like for these folks, they're going to get the few pounds of ground venison I give them every year, and that's all they're ever probably going to have a year. But if you're interested in making it part of your lifestyle, I think start with meals that you're really comfortable with, and put wild game in there, and probably have your spaghetti, chili, things like that, and then slowly work your way out to things that basically just feature roasted, cooked meat in some way. And your palate, like you said, Harold, your palate will adjust, and you'll pretty soon you'll crave that stuff. And once you get way down the rabbit hole, it's hard to eat store-bought meat anymore, because this doesn't taste at all like wild squirrel.
Yeah, absolutely. And also things like marinade, they can help with, like, say you do have a problem with overcooking. Well, if you're going to soak that meat in marinade overnight, it's not going to be dry like it would be if you overcooked it normally. So I mean, it can overcome a lot of mistakes even when you're cooking a wild game. So yeah, absolutely. I love all kinds of wild game. I mean, I've tried everything. I mean, there's some people who definitely get more radical, on some of the stuff they eat. I really don't. There's some animals. I mean, I'm not eating possum and raccoon stuff, but I know a lot of people do, and that's fine.
You're missing out, Harold. You're missing out.
I know, but I'll eat like groundhog. I love groundhog. I mean, there's some things I love, and some things I kind of stay away from. But it's everybody, their own thing, whatever. But I don't know. I mean, you're talking about, you were mentioning possibly doing some pigeon hunting, and there's some people that would be grossed out by that, and some people that would love that,
Well, I don't think I'd eat a pigeon in town. You know what I mean? It's just the same as I wouldn't eat a raccoon or a squirrel in town. But I couldn't even guess how many raccoons I've eaten. Hundreds of raccoons. I used to trap, and then I would hunt a lot with my grandpa when I was a kid, and I still, raccoon is probably one of my favorite wild games to eat.
So how would you cook
it? Basically the same as you'd cook a squirrel. And again, the outside of a raccoon, and there are preferences, like female raccoons and younger taste better. Like a big old 35-pound boar raccoon is going to taste just exactly what you'd expect it to taste like. I mean, I do think that there are limits to what you can do with an animal. They kind of are what they are. Like in Michigan, pretty much everything that I've ever killed, and I've killed darn near everything that walks, crawls, swims, or flies, I've tried to eat. The only exceptions, mink, skunk, and fox. And I would eat a fox. I just haven't killed that many. I've eaten coyote. Not terrible. I did some coyote tacos with roasted, braised coyote meat. And same thing, the outside of a coyote smells just god awful. But if you can skin well, and with any carnivore, there are more, or anything that eats carcasses or anything, you do have to be mindful of parasites, things like that. Wear gloves, be smart about it, cook it fully. I wouldn't eat a medium rare raccoon, I'll tell you that. But I've eaten a lot of well done braised and slow cooked raccoons. Porcupine in northern Michigan are one of my favorite things to eat. Nothing moves slower; they're tender. But if you get them out of a cedar swamp, you're going to have cedar flavored porcupine.
Yes.
If you get them out of beech trees, which is where we usually get them, is because they're destroying beech and maple. They're just going to, they're going to basically taste like that. So there are limits. I've eaten a lot of possum also, and they're actually pretty good. But I have seen possums. I want a pet possum really badly. My wife frowns upon it. I don't think it's going to sell. But I've seen possums eating some of the grossest things I've ever seen. So you have to have like some cognitive dissonance, I guess, and take one thing away from what you're eating. But a lot of it is imagination and proper preparation, and then kind of interest in it. When I've been trapping raccoons, part of it is I really like being out and about trapping. I mean, I just enjoy the process of it. I like tanning hides, tanning raccoon hide, and I sold some, and it's fun. And you're out and about. And I don't like to be wasteful, but there's also, if I come out of the woods with a sled with 8 raccoons in it, like, yeah, I can fill a freezer with raccoon meat, but there's only so much you really want to eat. But same thing, like I've eaten plenty of muskrat, and I think they're quite tasty. Beaver, same thing. They're a pretty tasty critter, but they have scent glands. You have to be mindful of how you process them.
Yeah. And like I said, it's just, everybody's got, I think it's important too, if you could find like a mentor to kind of guide you through the process. So if you try it and like it's really good, and then they can show you how they do it, that's nice, because you might just do it wrong and then not like it, but if somebody actually shows you the right way to do it, you might really like it,
That's a good point.
Yeah, and even with squirrel, when I've talked about with people who are new and they went squirrel hunting and it wasn't for me. Well, behind the knee on a squirrel, there's a little bit of a kernel. It looks like a little tiny kernel that's a scent gland. And then in their armpit, it looks like a webbing, but it's an off color, and it's basically a gland. And if you leave those in when you cook it, it's going to have a stronger or off flavor. It's not going to kill you. It's not going to be the worst thing. But it won't be as palatable as if you're mindful and you remove those parts first.
Yeah.
Well, and when I've seen some people go squirrel hunting and they're new to it, they're wearing, or grouse hunting or whatever, they've got their fancy orange vest with the little back thing, and they're out there, they're sweating their butt off, and they're throwing these carcasses right behind their back where they're already putting out 100-degree heat as they're walking around, and they're out there for 4 or 5 hours walking around. Then they throw it in the truck, and they haven't processed these things, and it's hours later, and you've got like green belly darn near on these animals before they start to skin them out. Yeah, those aren't going to be as good as if right after you get them, you dress them and cool them down. I mean, there's a process that really makes a difference.
Yeah, squirrel hunting especially. Yeah, I've done that. You see that a lot because it starts so early in the season. You go out there hunting when it's 80 degrees, hunting squirrel. Go ahead, Rachel. What did you have?
So do you almost always field dress them, even with like your birds?
It depends on the temperature, but I don't dilly-dally for sure. I mean, I prefer to do it at home because I'd like to, like all my waste, I use non-lead ammo. I've switched to non-lead ammo. Part of that is, there are non-lead folks who are worried about hawks and other birds of prey eating lead and having neurological issues. And I mean, that's a concern to me, but it didn't move the needle for me as much as I'm feeding these things to my children. And we know for sure ingested lead is probably less than aerosolized lead or anything like that, but it still could be a problem, especially with as much as we would possibly consume. So I shoot pretty much all non-lead ammo, which also has made a difference because now what I try and do is bring those animals home before I dress them, and then I'll dress them and then feed any waste to my chickens. And I don't have to worry about eating eggs that are full of lead also.
That's a really
yeah, especially with deer, anything, lead is effective, but I shoot for squirrels. I either do non-lead rifle rounds or with rimfire, or I actually like shooting number 3 or 4 waterfowl steel shot with a shotgun with squirrels if I'm using a shotgun. And then I use I shoot a lot of deer with a bow and a lot of squirrels with a bow, so there's no lead there, but I'll shoot like monolithic copper rounds for deer, and then you don't have to worry about all the lead being in your food, because maybe it won't ever make a difference, but I know that I don't want to have any neurological reasons or neurological problems that are caused by myself. If it's going to happen, I'd rather have it happen by something not directly that I've done. So
yeah, as much of that is you're eating, your family's eating. Yeah, I mean, if it's 1 deer a year or something, or if you know, a dozen squirrel a year or something like that, maybe it ain't gonna be as an issue. But if you're filling your freezer full of game meat like that, it could over decades, become an issue possibly. Yeah, I'm with you. Well, I mean, okay, let's just do this. Do you have a kind of a favorite thing out of all the wild game that you hunt? Is there a favorite meal that you kind of have that you think this is why I do this?
So probably, but now basically I like to see my wife and children smile, and there are certain meals that they really, really like. And recipes from my grandparents too. I don't know if I could pick that. Venison arrosé is high in the running. Seared wood duck breast, and then I'll do a morel mushroom red wine reduction sauce on top of that.
I'm coming to your place for dinner.
I don't know if my wife has ever looked at me with more love than when I serve her that. That one's pretty good. And wood duck, we go pretty medium rare on the wood duck breast and just sear it, but it's quite good. Those probably, or I don't know if you still consider it wild game because I kind of fish for it, but I make a pretty mean snapping turtle, either soup or fried turtle. Pretty darn good.
Nice.
Yeah,
I've never had turtle.
No, you never had. Oh, snapping turtle! In Michigan, you can only get 2 a year, and they have to have a certain carapace length, front shell to back. But I've grown up. That's the July 15th every year is a very exciting day for me. That's the opening day of turtle season, and the kids and I went out and we got a really big one this year, and then I got a smaller one later. But it's fun. And then
we have a huge one in our lake.
Ooh, well, yeah.
Before we move.
if you see one huge one, you probably have about 12 more that you don't see.
Yeah, it's pretty big. Yeah.
One of our bigger staples is probably a bone-in shoulder blade roast. So I do it I will take the silver skin off. So I'll trim the venison shoulder blade, bone in, and then trim the silver skin off, sear it, just in a cast iron skillet with a rub on it. So it's browned, but not cooked. And then I'll do crock pot with generally a little bit of venison stock, and then about a quart of canned tomatoes, and then lots of seared onions or cooked onions and garlic, fried onions and garlic, and put that in, let it go low and slow all day. And it is also an extraordinarily satisfying thing to, when it's done, you reach in with the tongs and you just pull out that venison shoulder blade. You just give it a little wiggle and the blade comes right out. And then the meat is just absolutely fantastic, served over some roasted potatoes, or egg noodles are good. That is probably our biggest staple hit that everyone is always in the mood for. It's fantastic as leftover sandwiches. And it's super easy too. It's just roasting and then a crock pot. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the reason that now, I don't bone out my shoulder blades on my deer anymore. Since I started doing that, I just leave that in, and it's always a hit. I'm sure I'll do it over Christmas.
I think I'm gonna have to try that with the next one we get. That sounds good.
I'll definitely, anything like that, just where the meat's just so tender like that.
Yeah.
Just terrific.
Well, and it would be less work when you're butchering too, to not have to try to get all that meat off of that shoulder.
Yeah, it's pretty tough to trim all the meat away. So I just basically slice it in the shape of, and that's why I tell the kids that we always shoot them behind the shoulder blade. We don't go through shoulder blades. That's a mistake, because then you can't eat this part. So you got to shoot them right behind the shoulder blade.
Yeah. How about you, Rachel? You got a favorite that you like to whip together?
Well, I mean, I already talked about my favorite. Right now, our favorite thing is the corned venison. So yeah, I mean, we just look forward to that every year because you only get so many.
Yeah.
My husband doesn't have a lot of time to hunt, so usually we only get like 1 or 2, and I have yet to get a deer. I'd like to, but I haven't. I'm new to hunting. I was home with the kids all these years, so
Yeah.
and my husband has teased me that every time I go now, all we see is rabbits. So
Usually I have squirrels jumping on me in the tree stand.
oh, we
that's
definitely need to do some squirrel hunting this year. We have so many squirrels, but the corned venison, which I shared the recipe in our show notes, so it can get posted. It's really easy to do, and it's so good. I make that into a unwich since I can't have bread, but my husband loves to, of course, to make his Reuben sandwich.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm old school. You just give me a nice thick slice of backstrap and throw that in a skillet with a nice hard sear on both sides, and I'm a happy man. To me, that is like, it don't get any better than that. I mean, that is the best meal in the world to me. I mean, I'd rather have that than just about anything. And as simple as that is, that's all I want, a little salt on it, and sear that for about a minute on each side. Oh, that's so good.
One of the things our kids always ask for is venison heart chili.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's like one of their favorites, which is interesting because our kids have never really liked the organs, but that one they ask for. And I usually will pressure cook the heart just because it can be kind of tough. But yeah, just chili instead of ground meat, we use the heart.
Now, if you do the hearts like out of quail or
you need a lot,
like that, those things are just throw them in a skillet and sear them up real nice. Those are really good.
Yeah, we did squirrel soup. I don't know, a couple weeks ago. Some of my family came to visit, including my grandmother, who is my daughter's namesake. And my grandmother is very particular. Like, she loves wild game, and my grandfather got her a lot of it. But she's kind of particular. She wants squirrel front shoulders in particular. She'll eat the rest of it, but she likes squirrel front shoulders as her favorite thing. But so she was coming to visit, so I actually made squirrel soup, like a squirrel and vegetable soup with some veggies from the garden. It was probably late September when they came to visit, or maybe October. I don't remember. We still had some, I think we did some Swiss chard, some other stuff in the soup. And my daughter was sitting next to my grandmother, and I got everybody, I served them all their soup. And my daughter just looks up with this sparkling little 2-year-old eyes, or 2.5-year-old, I guess now. And she said, "Daddy, I sure hope the heart's in my bowl of soup." And my grandmother just looked over and like couldn't have been more proud of this little girl, just so happy about eating squirrel soup. And I'm like, "Honey, I'll make sure that there's heart. Because I'll usually do that with the squirrels. I'll throw them right in the soup, the hearts. And I'm like, I will make sure that there's a heart in your bowl of soup. And with squirrel, that's what I try and salvage as many hearts as I can. I like squirrel liver too. As long as you get a good shot on them, that's, you can mix that right in it or fry it up. It tastes so good. And then your venison heart, like you said, is I usually slice mine thinly, do a dry batter, and just pan fry it. It is a little bit tougher, but I love that flavor.
Oh, it's so good. The other thing we like is to make, I don't know if you ever use kidneys, but we love to make kidney pie. Basically, it's basically like a pot pie, but we use the kidney.
So. I've never made kidney pie. I've mixed kidneys in like when I do a stir fry. And I'll do that with like the pigs that we butcher too.
Yeah, it's a stronger flavor, not quite as strong as liver, but it's definitely a stronger flavor.
Yeah. Well, I've gotten pretty rare. I've tried about everything. I had in-laws over. We had a party. I mean, our place is kind of the gathering place generally. And because I can only like sit and chat for so long, I just start cooking and start cooking for people. And we were playing cards, and I'm like, whatever, I'm just going to start cooking. And I'd gotten $1 that fall. Actually, I think I gotten $2 that fall. So I had, within like a week of bow hunting, so I had 4 whitetail testicles in my refrigerator. And I'm like, okay. And I'd seen a recipe about this. I'm like, we're going to try this. And I cooked them. They looked good. They smelled good. And I served them to my guests. And I said, these are venison fried venison, or Rocky Mountain oysters or whatever. And none of them believed me with what I was actually, they thought it was something else, and they ate them and like, oh, those were really good. What were they? I'm like, I told you what they were. And they're like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, well, all right, those were pretty good. So I don't always do that, but because most of the time, like, it's fun for something like that if you're like showing off cooking skills or kind of goofing, I guess. But like, I don't think that's worth saving those all the time. But they were a hit that night at Euchre, I'll tell you that.
Euchre, that's such a Michigan thing.
No, it's Indiana too.
Is it?
It's Indiana too. Yeah, I know some Indiana folks. Yep.
I actually like Rocky Mountain oysters. We had them, with cow testicles and stuff. They're actually, once you get over what it actually is, they're not that bad.
No, they're chewy, but yeah. But I don't like wasting things like wantonly. So I at least want to know what I'm missing out on. Like I've saved the caul fat from like the lining of a deer's stomach, or what holds, like they call it, and cooked with that. And it's cool. It is a ton of work to get that out and get it not torn and all that stuff. So is it worth it? I don't know. It's kind of fun to do every now and again, but that's the kind of thing I don't feel bad about going in the waste pile either.
I have some in my freezer right now, and I need to do something with it, but it's not from a deer. It's from a cow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I need to do
something. But I also think, like, I love foraging, and that's where I recommend, I think a lot of people, besides the difficulty with consuming wild game, get frustrated because they're not always very successful in terms of harvesting. They go hunting a lot and they don't get much. And I think part of that is it makes a huge difference how much time you spend in the woods. And if you're over a bait pile, you're probably going to see deer, but if you're really trying to target certain animals, or if you're not hunting over bait, or if it's illegal to hunt over bait, woodsmanship helps a lot. And that's where I think, and shooting skills. And that's where I think shooting skills and woodsmanship, both from squirrel hunting, because you get time in the woods and you get a lot of opportunities on an actual animal. Shooting at a target is not the same as shooting at an animal. And then foraging, because you're out in the woods pretty much year round, you learn the animal's patterns more, and you have more of an opportunity to find really what they're up to and learn more about them. Like in Michigan, our firearm season opens November 15th. And there are a lot of people who that's their one day in the woods. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but you're not going to have the same experience, and you're unlikely to have the same skill level as someone who bow hunts, who forages, who traps, who squirrel hunts, all those things. You get a lot more time in the woods and a lot more experience, and you get more deer. So then you can cook a little bit more and find out what you like and don't like.
Yeah. My advice to anybody who's just starting out is, you might want to, a lot of people start and they'll just go deer hunting right off the bat. It's like, you want to be successful and you want to put some meat in the freezer, take a shotgun and go squirrel hunting.
Yep.
You're probably going to get your limit. Probably. It depends on where you're at.
Yep.
But around here, most woods, you get a limit in a couple hours, 3 or 4 hours, and you're going to have a high success rate. It's not hard to get, with a shotgun, you're going to do well. And you're going to have some success. You're going to feel good about it. It's going to give you an opportunity to dive into the game meat experience.
Exactly.
Yeah, because deer can definitely be a challenge. It takes some skill and some patience, and you definitely want to work up to that if you can by just starting with some small game, for sure.
Well, with butchering, you can butcher. Add one thing, Harold. I'm sorry.
You're cutting out a little bit. No, you're just cutting
without any specialized equipment. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Is it good now?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
You can butcher squirrels with no specialized equipment. And rabbits with no specialized equipment. Once you start butchering a deer, like I've got a 3/4 horse meat grinder, I've got a pretty nice vacuum sealer, a sausage stuffer, all those things that are more specialized. With a squirrel, darn near, if you got a pocket knife, you can be ready to rock and roll and butcher a squirrel, and it'll teach you the same basic principles as you'll need when you start to get up to big game.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And I'll say this too: all this wild game pairs really well with your garden harvests. use your veggies
exactly.
and stuff, and make some nice, really nice meals. So it's just the perfect, compliment to your homestead. You just bring it all together, put it on the table, and then nothing feels better than having a table spread just of stuff that you've grown, stuff you've hunted for, foraged for, just all this laid out and eating a meal. I mean, it's a good feeling to do that.
Well, and to your point with children, so I work with kids on nutrition as part of my job, but I also have 2 kids, and I want them to eat quality food. And I've run a community garden and taught kids gardening classes, and kids are more likely to eat a bigger variety of food that they participate in and know the story of.
Yeah.
So I've had picky eaters. Their parents warn me they're picky eaters. Then they're out in the garden with me eating raw kale and radishes.
Yeah.
Because they grew it and they participated in it. And I think hunting and fishing and homesteading in general is the same way.
Yeah.
I think I'm kind of lucky my kids are not picky eaters anyway, but I think even more so, they're more open to it just because they participate in it all the time. I mean, they've helped me grow all this food. Like, they're debating on how they want to process their deer, because my son was with me when we got one doe and my daughter was with me when we got another doe, and they're both still hanging, and they're like, well, we want to do this with this, and this is our deer, and this is how we want to do it. And I'm not worried at all about them eating whatever we cook out of that, because it's their deer,
Right.
And I think when you're trying to get kids or even adults, the more ownership you have over your food, the more likely you are to enjoy it.
Yeah. Plus, you're just in that great outdoors, which is my favorite part, even if we come back empty-handed.
Mm-hmm.
Out there.
I'm not even a kid, but when I participate in my food, I like
exactly.
it. And I'm
exactly.
Oh yeah.
I just love it. Yeah, that whole the full circle, and you're getting exercise. I mean, the whole thing, everything about it is healthy.
Well, yeah, like I said earlier, it's harvesting wild game, cooking wild game. It's a rewarding homesteading skill, and I just think that if any homesteaders aren't taking advantage of that and making that part of their homestead, they're really missing out. They're really missing out. And
I agree. Yep.
You can definitely raise a lot of food, and that's great, and I think you should, but you'll be lacking something if you're not taking advantage of hunting some wild game, and it should be done responsibly and ethically. Like you said, use the animal, do it right, don't over harvest at times. There's sometimes the rules are there for a reason, sometimes maybe they're not. I don't know always.
Yeah.
But I think most people know what's responsible, and you're over hunting an area, or if you're just taking more than you should for whatever reason, or you're leaving, like you said, you walk up and see a deer with just the backstraps missing, and that's just that's crazy. It's not ethical. It's not right. Use your animal, hunt for them, use them, and be responsible and feed your family. And it's a great way to do that, for sure.
Oh yeah.
Anything in closing you want to throw in there?
Yeah, no, just piggybacking on you, get outside. And it's not people talk about it being inexpensive because a hunting license is whatever dollars. It is not inexpensive, because you're going to buy cool gear to go out and hunt with too, and you've got to stay warm and all that stuff. But don't worry, don't factor that in. Just enjoy the time outdoors and spend as much time out there as you can with people who enjoy the outdoors with you.
I'll tell you, I hunted for many years with a used $100 12 gauge shotgun, and I would go out in flannel shirt and blue jeans and hunt, and was successful. I'm just saying, you don't have to do that.
You don't. Yeah.
You can do that, though. You might be more successful if you have all the toys, but I've had plenty of success without all those toys.
That's true. Especially if you're just starting and you're just looking to enjoy it. Yeah. I mean, especially small game hunting, you don't need anything other than something to stay warm.
Yep.
For deer hunting, the more specialized you get, archery hunting, you need maybe a little bit more. But yeah, my grandpa killed a heck of a lot of deer from the ground with a recurve bow, wearing basically just earth tone clothing. So it can be done. I've killed them. I've killed them from the ground plenty of times. You don't need to get too wild. Just kind of build up your skill set, but just get out and get the experience and learn from it.
Good word. Anything, Rachel, you want to throw in there at the end?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about some pretty fancy food, but I did want to encourage people, don't let don't let that overwhelm you. If you don't have any butchering skills, that deer is going to taste pretty good as tacos and spaghetti and
chili,
all of those, and chili. Yep.
Yep.
If that's all that you can do because you didn't know how to do it, it still all eats the same. It's
Yeah.
still
Yep.
food in your belly.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
there's nothing wrong with starting, just starting. And that's how we did. I mean, when I say we butchered deer, we literally did like the quote unquote butchered. If you looked at what we used to do, it looked horrible, but it still put food in our bellies. So,
Yeah.
yep.
I
Just start and acquire the skills slowly.
Yep.
Well, in hunting, I will never be when I die, I hope that my phone deletes all my spots from my Onyx so that no one ever finds my sweet hunting and foraging spots. But hunters are generally quite generous with time and information. So like we like other people who want to do the things we love. So like if you have a question and you know someone who hunts, I guarantee that person will be happy to answer the question. And honestly, I've had people come over and use my equipment. It doesn't bother me at all. I mean, I don't want, I want to know who you are if you're gonna be in my home, but I've had friends who have gotten deer or, other things and they're not sure about it. Bring it over. I've got the stuff. We can knock it out in no time and I can teach you how to do it. That is okay. Most of us, and don't leave me any venison. Good Lord, I've got plenty. Come over with a good attitude and maybe bring some coffee with you, and I'll be happy to help you butcher. It's no problem. People enjoy that.
Yeah.
Yeah, hunters are a lot like just homesteaders in general, that they're always anxious to, excited about helping others and just forming a community. Like you said, they don't necessarily want to share their spots. I mean, some of them have spots that are so secret the deer don't know about it.
Oh yeah,
but
yeah.
But yeah, you're right. There's a lot of generosity in the hunting world, just like there is in the homesteading world, and most of them are pretty eager to help you out if they can, for sure. Yeah. So yeah, great stuff. Jonah, I knew we picked the right person to come on and talk about this today.
So much. It was great.
Very good. I mean, I got you. Well, you made me hungry for one thing, but you also made me excited about getting out there and getting some more meat in the house, getting out in the woods.
I think we're gonna have to converge on your place on the same weekend. But I might have to wait till you get some morel mushrooms for that.
I don't want any possum or deer testicles. So we'll just pick something else.
I'm an adventurous eater. I'll eat whatever.
You can make a choice. Well, I hope you all come for a visit sometime. We can do something. I appreciate you having me on here. I love talking about this kind of stuff and hopefully getting people interested in getting outdoors more too.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Well, until next time, folks. Until next time, happy homesteading. God bless.
And grow where you're planted.
All right.